Local productions seen on Delta College Public Media are made possible with support from viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Junia Doan's A Spark. I'm Junia Doan. Thank you for joining us. My guest today is Jacqueline Weld, a biographer and novelist who has long been involved in the arts and the literary world. She is chairman of the Casita Maria Center for the Arts and Education and a noted connoisseur. Welcome, Jackie. One of the things that drew me to you was your wonderful way with words. You are the author of two books, very different. One, a biography of Peggy Guggenheim, Peggy the Wayward Guggenheim, and one, a mysterious, evocative South American fiction book, Rara Avis, that talks about many things at many levels. That's what I took away from it. Anyway, your way with words in person and your way with words in, say, Rara Avis. There's a line that you said that something about talking into the night, um, fanning themselves with their own fairy tales. Now, isn't that a beautiful phrase? That was just so beautiful. Or in Peggy the Wayward Guggenheim, you quote Lawrence Vale, one of her husbands, as saying she was the vacuum into which he, things could be, I mean, she was ignorant, which apparently she was, I don't know. Um, but the way with words is what lifts the reader into a different space, your adjectives sometimes, or your things. So tell me about how you learned to write or where you learned to write.
Well, basically, you're born with it. And I must say, listening to some of those quotes, I hadn't remembered how good I was. My goodness. Um, when you tap into write, an unconscious you comes out and it just starts talking and you channel it. And especially in Rara Avis, I really let myself go into the more poetic realms. And I enjoyed myself, and I used a trope. And whenever I was sort of stumped in that book, I would say it was hot. It starts off with it was hot. It was so hot. All you could do was dream, dream, and wait, and whatever it was. But so I would then use that trope to get back in. And in Peggy, I don't know where I got this ability with words, except that my grandmother was a writer. She was very poetic. She came from Uruguay, and she wrote very elaborate verses. But basically, she was a talker, a conversationalist, and a writer. And she really valued words. She couldn't sleep unless she had a book to read. She was an avid reader, as am I. I've always loved reading from a very young age, and I wanted to read at a very young age, and I would make believe I could read, even though I couldn't read a thing. And in South America, where I first learned to read, really was in Venezuela. They would have these lovely books in which they would separate out the syllables with a nice picture, let's say, of a bird, which in Spanish is pájaro. You'd have the pa, the ha, and the ro, and you'd figure it out. And uh, and that's how I learned to read. But my grandmother was the influence on me in that, and the rest just comes from I don't know where.
Do you think you went to Sarah Lawrence in order to write more, what do I want to say, with more focus?
No. If anything, Sarah Lawrence sort of disfocuses you. I went to Sarah Lawrence because I wanted to be a painter. That's what I wanted to do first. Um, and then I used to think I was good. And then I went to Sarah Lawrence and learned that maybe I wasn't quite as good, but I didn't quite understand what they wanted from me, because finding structure as a painter is very, very difficult. And I sort of like painting from life. I would draw my sister endlessly in very unflattering poses, but the abstraction was difficult for me. I can do color field. That's really what I enjoy doing. But then I don't know why, as you sort of mature, you think you can only do one thing well. And maybe that thing is the one that's hardest for you. I remember having conversations with other artists who mistrusted what came easy. Painting came easy. Writing had to work a little more. But there you have it. And even when I was young, I could write basically well.
What
Words.
drew you to apply and go to law school at Columbia?
Well, here it is. I go to Sarah Lawrence, where I studied a lot about strange religious cults in Bengal. I studied with Joseph Campbell, the mythology,
Oh, really? He was there? No kidding.
and he really influenced me, as did my teacher Ada Bozeman, who wrote about politics and culture and world affairs. And she started off her class with the use of words. What do words mean? And you see it now when words are used in a way uh, that don't really convey their true meaning in order to create a different meaning. Um, Good examples I'm not coming up with right now, because they're all the political ones where you hear one thing you know is not true, and so on. But anyway, so I wanted to go to art history school or art school or something like that. And she said, no, there are no real careers for women in that field. I wanted to study mythology, but what career would I have with that? And so she said, you are going to go to law school. You're going to be bored out of your mind, but you're going to sit there and you're going to get your degree. And since she was a barrister and had gone down the Nile and eaten human flesh and had made me read a book by Henry Maine on ancient law, which was spectacular, I thought I would go to law school, go down the Nile, and that was going to be my career.
Right.
But in fact, not exactly.
So after law school, why didn't you take the next step to lead her kind of life?
Well, I did.
What
I
did you
actually
do?
went to work for Colorado Rural Legal Services, and I was in a place called Alamosa, Colorado, which had 3 blocks and had very few people. And I asked Mr. Campbell, what should I see, study, look for uh, when I went there? And he told me about the penitentes. They were a cult, let's say, and I think it was in Taos, or maybe you will forgive me if I don't remember exactly where, but every year they would anoint a member of their group to be crucified. And they would walk, and they would go to this ritual with joy. It was outlawed at a certain point. So I started looking for strange religious cults in Colorado. I didn't do much about it, but I enjoyed seeing in my clients who would come in with odd tattoos on their knuckles. Um, what can I say?
So, did you not see the next step, or did some Pied Piper suggest another direction for you?
No, I just threw myself into being Jackie the lawyer. I had 136 indigent clients. My first client ever came in and said, I just shot and killed a man. And I said, oh, really? And I excused myself because, you have to be alone with a client. Otherwise, it's not a, privileged conversation.
Private. Right.
Privilege, which is the ones where you don't, as a lawyer, have to disclose. So I said, excuse me. And I went to the head of the firm and I said, this guy just killed somebody. And he said, no, we could only take civil cases. So you get the facts out of him and you send him off to the public defender. I go back and he tells me this story. He was turkey shooting and he was making turkey noises and camouflaged as a turkey, as was the victim, who was camouflaged like a turkey and making turkey sounds. So he shot him. And this case went up like 7 times to the Colorado Court of Appeals. because maybe he should have known that the other guy would have been making turkey noises. And then he told me he went to see the widow and how awful all that was, and hunting was his life, etc. Well, this, starting with that particular client, I mean, the cases were fun. I mean, I traveled all around that area. I was introduced to what they call Tex-Mex. I've never, even though my family came from Venezuela and Uruguay, spicy meals were not de rigueur. We didn't eat spicy food. So the first I went to visit some clients, they gave me very proudly a homemade enchilada. I thought I would die. A homemade tamale. It was so hot. Anyway, I
What is the food in Uruguay and Venezuela when you were eating it as a child?
Well, Uruguay is very, very European. It has a very European atmosphere, very much European influence. As you know, Uruguay is right next to Argentina, very much influenced by the French. The French were the ne plus ultra. They were what people imitated and so on. So the Uruguayan food was basically, they also had beef. So you'd have beef, and they would call something a baby beef, which was bigger than your plate. And I know, and you'd have grilled baby beef and not that many veggies, and it was fantastic. And so we grew up in Venezuela too. The food is not spicy, even though they have black beans and rice. They're not spicy black beans, and you would always have a little bit of steak once again, and the black bean, maybe, and plátanos. Plátanos are plantains, and the way you should eat them is when they're ripe and very sweet. So this is what I grew up on. Lots of beef.
Was it a family tradition to study in the United States, or was that something you had in your heart?
No, not at all. I mean, when I think the story of my parents, they were on their honeymoon when they had me. My father met my mother in Montevideo, Uruguay, and they got married and they went on their honeymoon, which was lasting over, I mean, it was 9 months to the minute, I think, that I was born. My poor mother was very young, and I think that's exactly what happened. So they had gone, they'd gone to Buenos Aires, they went to Peru, they went to Mexico, they went to California, they went to Las Vegas. Finally, they were in New York on their way to London to have me. And without dating myself, the doctor said to my mother, madam, isn't that a time to go to London? After the war, no beds, no hospitals, no supplies. And that is the only reason I was born in New York.
And did your parents decide to stay? Where
Not
did
in
you
that
grow up
moment.
then? Because you mentioned South America.
Not in that moment in time. My parents bundled me up. And those days, it was 36 hours in the air to get to Montevideo or Uruguay, and it took for 8 hours to go to Caracas. So these were not short trips. Bundled up, went to see my grandmother in Venezuela, probably stayed for a while, then went to see the other family in Uruguay, stayed for a few months. Then sister number two somehow was engendered. And they said, we like that doctor in New York. So they go back to New York. And then they have number
Oh,
three. I mean, it's like you couldn't make this up. But, so then they had number three. At that point, I think by number three, maybe we spent a little more time in New York, but not as much. And then by number four, I was, taken out of school. I didn't really study in school till I was much older, because I remember I was taken out of school and we'd go to Caracas, which, my father's mother was in Caracas and he was very much of a mama's boy. And Caracas was much closer also. So we would spend long periods of time there. And I had a tutor early on. My mother felt guilty that,
right,
wasn't
school to
school.
school.
But my
Now, I
father
read
helped
that
me
your
learn
great
more
great
from him. Huh?
grandfather was president of
Pardon me?
Uruguay. What was his business?
Well, after the war, he was importing and exporting, and I think he went to Buenos Aires to buy, I don't know, but let's say barbed wire. I don't know what it was. He was an importer exporter, and he was waiting in Buenos Aires for this shipment, and so he hopped over to Montevideo, and he was staying at the Grand Hotel in Montevideo, which is the Victoria Plaza, and they were very English in Montevideo. They had English customs. So you'd have tea and you'd have tea sandwiches and all the rest of it. And so my father was about hanging around at tea time when my grandmother was having tea with two of her friends from Chile. Turned out my father knew the two Chileans because he'd gone out with somebody they knew. And so they invited him to sit at the table. And along comes my mother after school in her school uniform. And my father said to me that he said to himself, "Is this the woman I'm going to marry?" And there you have it. I could go into
That
more detail, but you got the gist.
interesting.
Yeah.
And after the two books you wrote for a magazine, tell us about
Well,
that.
I wrote the social diary for a while.
Well,
And,
that sounds full of mischief.
but I decided to be like Aileen Maley, who was always good to her friends. And, um, and I never wrote mischief. I never wrote anything personal, but I did entertain myself. I wrote what I would call the preamble. So I would start the report on whatever who was at the party. I would have, one of my columns said, "When is the last minute no show ever acceptable? Never, unless there's been a death, your own, or there's been a hospitalization, again your own." And so I had a lot of fun with that. And then I had the what to wear anyhow, anywhere, because I wrote about going to the costume institute, at the Met, and I was standing next to Lucille Perlon, the wonderful Lucille, whose husband Guy was at that. This was a while ago. Whose husband was chairing the event, so we were off to the side, and in comes Galliano. Galliano is wearing an emerald green suit without a shirt to display his orange dyed chest hairs, which match the orange sort of sequins and incrustations on his lapel. He had two pigtails and the mustache, and I think he may have been wearing docksiders. At this point, my wonderful late husband starts to giggle because he takes one look at Galliano and he can't help it. And poor Louise is trying to say, "It's Galliano."
So, how did you describe that?
Huh? I
How
described
did
that
you
in my
describe that?
no, I put that in my column. What is black tie anymore anyhow?
That's really witty. What causes you to have a really good wit and other people's not to? Can you acquire that ability?
A what? A really good wit?
Yes.
No, you're born with it. Sorry, people. You got it or you don't got it. It's like the Mel Brooks when the poor guy is struggling with the suitcase. I got it. I got it. I don't got it. And the you trying to be funny doesn't work. I can't help it. I think because I'm one of four sisters. I don't know. My father had a sense of humor. Uh, we all had a sense of humor. My uncles were very amusing. Eh, You know,
Yeah, it's a
I grew up,
style.
I grew up in a household where people had a sense of humor.
I think in Rara Avis there's a line about conversation is an art that's transportable. And I thought, that is so true.
You
You
take it
know,
with
I,
you.
yes, and effective. Yes,
How
very,
funny.
very so. So then your life went into a different direction. Would you care to say a little bit about that?
Well, I'm trying to think of what you're really saying. I mean, it
Your
didn't
personal life.
it didn't go into a different direction. It went into the sort of same directions. But I have, I'm very involved with a number of El Llamazenaries, if you will. I chair Casita Maria Inc., which is the oldest Latino organization in New York, which is about to be 90 years old coming up. And that takes up a lot of my time and a lot of my passion, if you will, because Latinos are the biggest minority in this country, but they haven't really wrested the political power as yet. But in any event, my sisters and all of us have been involved in one way or another with the promoting of Latin American art and culture. And there we have it. And so
Wow.
I'm now working on a memoir, which I have done two, some introductions to other people's books and so on, which I always find amusing because when I start to write about art, I maybe make up some of that stuff myself. I always remember from my early youth the picture plane continuum and other, phrases that you got out of these art magazines that made no sense. But in any event, I'm now writing a memoir I started out writing the 80s when New York was so much fun. And then
It
I
was.
throw in a few other things. And I don't know if anybody will care anymore about that because I think my audience is probably going off into another world right now. And who cares about the discotheques, Les Jardins and uh, Sanctuary and all those places that were around that were fun. And I write about being the junior committee all the time. And
Right.
yeah, the junior committee. And I quote Fran Lebowitz, who said, "Youth in New York City is definitely not wasted on the young."
Right. So, what did you learn from your husbands?
Well, I had, uh, I don't want to ask which one because that sounds
No, we did not
la
say.
labor, but my late husband was a management consultant. And whereas I was trained as a lawyer, lawyers are taught to think, or not even taught, when people say law school does this or that to you, no, just like when you asked me about the writing, you are a certain type of person who goes to law school. So lawyers are taught to say, or on the one hand and on the other hand, on the one hand, you can do this, but you can do something else. But management consultants are paid to fix it. They don't say on the one hand, on the other hand, they say this is what you do. So I was just really mesmerized because my husband could figure things out. If I said, should I buy, and even the stupidities I asked, like, should I buy the green shawl or do you think I'm better off buying a brown jacket? He would analyze it. And
No kidding.
he was
My
just,
husband said, buy both.
he was
Don't
so,
stress
so
yourself
smart.
over two
I
dresses,
know, but no,
right?
I mean, but he taught me things about, when I had to do things for, in my position as chairman of Casita or other things. He said, you never go into a meeting without knowing the outcome. That, that,
Planning the outcome,
but
right?
now, yeah, now I'm spending more time in Palm Beach, which it was with my late husband that we bought this house in Palm Beach. I never
It's
expected to spend
gorgeous.
a lot of time here. We used to just come for weekends and go back and forth because it's such an easy trip to New York. And now I'm spending a little bit more time, especially since COVID, because it was so much easier being here.
And
And I see that
outdoors.
more and more New Yorkers are here. So I don't miss my friends in the way I would have thought. And they're all here. And hey,
Well,
you never know how many friends you have until they know you have a guest room in Florida. And there you go.
well, you're so charming. They would come if wherever you were. So I'm not taking that as the answer. But what do you think you have left to experience or learn?
Hey, surrealists thought the greatest voyage was into the mind. And some people don't know who they are. But so you could say, who am I? But no. I like when I think of travel, I like the exotic places. I've been to Paris, I've been to Rome. But my last sort of exotic trip was to Madagascar. And I could take it off anybody's bucket list because it takes forever to get there. And it's not as beautiful as I had imagined, but those are the kind of trips I really enjoy. I'd go to Mongolia. I've been to India, been to Egypt. I've been to those places. I've come back with many colonies of me, but let me talk about things you can transplant, take along with you, just like the commercial. Anything to declare? Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and there you have it.
Well, you know what I admire about you is it's like You're all glamour, but you're really smart, and you're smart about people, and you adjust your conversation somewhat, well, maybe we all do, to who you're with and what is the patois, what is the style of their talking. And I like people who have quick minds like that, and the ability to feel natural in a lot of different subjects. And I particularly like, and I do want to ask, where is your love of color from? All these wonderful rooms in intense color. Is that a South American thing? Is it a visual thing?
Well, frankly, it's an inherited thing. It's not so much South American because my mother in Uruguay, they're not. As I said, they're very European.
Right.
They would never have a room bright red. My father was the one who loved color to the degree where my mother gets a call from his secretary. My father wanted to paint his office pink. And the secretary said, really, in a panic, she didn't think a pink office was appropriate. But my father said this was a happy color, and that's what he wanted. And that was that. My father.
So I have enjoyed this. I hope you've enjoyed it. We've learned a lot, and that is that talent and preference comes to you, and it makes things easy or difficult. Writing, easy, right? You switch to a different column. Other things, maybe you need to push a little bit. So I learned that. And the ability to get along with people and make them feel good in the moment is you're just so good at that, and I appreciate that because right now we need people more like you to lift all our spirits as we go through perhaps certain times and uncertain times. So thank you for being a part of this. And to my audience, remember what I say all the time. Please go out and do something kind for someone you know and someone you don't know, and do it every day. So I'll see you next time, and thank you for tuning in.
To contact Junia, send her an email at juniadownsthespark@gmail.com. For more information, program schedules, and news about future guests, go to www.juniadownthespark.com. Thank you for joining us. See you next time on Junia Doan's The Spark.
Local productions seen on Delta College Public Media are made possible with support from viewers like you. Thank you.